my screen visible?
Yes, visible.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'll be beginning my presentation like on the India's Indo-Pacific policy. We'll look at the origin of the Indo-Pacific, the term of Indo-Pacific, what is the current status on how like India is conducting her relations, and what are the challenges and opportunities that the region provides with respect to India. So now this is the map of the Indo-Pacific, which is according to the Indian vision. So the Indian perception of Indo-Pacific is right from the littorals of the Eastern Africa to the western shores of America, which is inclusive of all the regions that encompass the region. There are now, what is the importance of Indo-Pacific? So, though there are varied perceptions, US perceives Indo-Pacific from the western shores of India to the western shores of America. India perceives it right from Africa to America, but the broader idea of Indo-Pacific as a region is seen for almost all the countries. The most important fact is that the most important sea lanes of communications pass through this region. They carry a wide variety of goods, including key energy exports and imports, which are really important for the health of an economy, especially given the dynamics of the economies in the region. Some of the dynamic economies like China, India, the tiger economies of the Southeast Asia are in this region. At the same time, we see a massive transformation and changes happening in Africa, which is again a part of Indo-Pacific. So this sort of brings in attention of all the world powers to this region. And again, this is a region with rich and promising demographic dividends. India is the country which has the largest number of youth population. China is again one of the the world's largest, most populous country. At the same time, we have the most populous countries in this region, and so this region is a pure demographic dividend for most of the countries, developed countries who wish to expand their markets. So Indo-Pacific becomes a key region where the Western powers are looking forward to establish their markets in the region. And most important fact is that this region is one of the most highly militarized region in the world. If you see the top 10 spenders of the countries which spend on military, most of them lie in the Indo-Pacific with the likes of United States of America, Pakistan, India, Russia, China. So these countries form a part of the Indo-Pacific. At the same time, this is also the region where the 5 of the recognized nuclear powers are there. So they are India, Pakistan, China, Russia, and the America. Now again, what makes this region more volatile is that with the presence of nuclear arsenals, the threat of non-state actors is looming really large in this region, with vibrant ethno-cultural and religious differences prevalent in the region, which is giving sort of a fuel to the conflicts happening. So the risk of the nuclear arsenals of Pakistan falling within the hands of the non-state actors like terrorist groups, the conflicts in the Middle East, the Taliban in Afghanistan, they all put forward a really great threat to the security and stability of the region. Now, what does the arrival and acceptance of the term Indo-Pacific imply? So most importantly, it implies that the end of the Euro-Atlantic preoccupation of the international relations domain. Whenever we see right from the Treaty of Westphalia, the preoccupation of the IR has always been with the Anglo-American, the Euro-Atlantic vision, and it has always been a narrative. It's always been the West and the rest. Now this rest is getting a more sort of renewed importance with the. Okay, sorry. With the rest, and this rest is getting a sort of renewed importance. It's a more inclusive terminology because Indo-Pacific encompasses both countries from Africa till America, as compared to Asia-Pacific, which also did not even include India. It was just the continental land-based countries of Asia, including China, Japan, and all, leaving India. And strategic nomenclature in terms of key marine features indicate a shift in the continental land-based strategic biases. So now the due importance is also being given to the key marine features and littorals in the realm of geopolitics. Also, when the discussion was about the Indian Ocean region and the Pacific as separate domains, there was always only the discussion of US and China while discussion. But now with the coming of Indo-Pacific, equal importance is rather given to the middle power states, including India, Australia, and African countries. And most importantly, this ends the continental land-based biases and more equal importance given to marine and naval strategies, importance given to the navies and all. So now, coining of the term Indo-Pacific. If we look back historically, this term was used by British anthropologist Augustus Henry Keane, though it was used all, anthropologically and culturally. When we say strategically, this term was first used by German geostrategist Karl Hochschober, who used the term Indo-Pazifischer Raum to describe the importance of this region to the German realpolitik. But given Hitler's preoccupation with continental Europe, this sort of an idea or strategy could not be materialized. In India, if we see, Kalidas Nag used it for the first time to draw a cross-cultural link and civilizational link of India with the countries of the East. And this was like inspired from Rabindranath Tagore, like his journey with Rabindranath Tagore. In post-colonial strategic literature, this term was first used by Gurpreet Khurana. He was a fellow in the National Maritime Foundation in 2007. The term gained significant importance in the foreign policies of many countries post Japanese PM Shinzo Abe's confluence of sea speech in 2007 in the Indian Parliament. Since then, the term has then appeared in white paper documents of many countries like Australia in 2013, the United States, Hillary Clinton, the then Secretary of State, mentioning in her speech and calling for Indian participation in the region. Now, now we are looking at, is Indo-Pacific a new concept or an old wine in a new bottle for India? So if we see historically, Indo-Pacific is a new term, but India has conducted her affairs in keeping up with the spirit of what constitutes Indo-Pacific. If we see the pre-modern era dating back to the Harappan civilization, the Indus Valley civilization, firstly is the presence of Lothal as a port city suggests a rich marine culture, a trade culture, sea-based trade culture. Secondly, the evidence of sea trade with Meluha and Oman. Meluha is the ancient name for Mesopotamia, which suggests that there was trade and traversing through the Strait of Hormuz back during the Indus Valley civilization. Then we know historically we have a legacy of rich trade with the Arab merchants, the Romans. The pepper was a prized possession for Rome. The trade in the Far East and the mercantile involvement in the region also suggests that we had the culture of engaging with Indo-Pacific, what constitutes Indo-Pacific way back then. The Chola expedition of the Sri Vijaya Empire in the Malacca Strait reflect the most classic example of hard power display in the region. This also implies that the strategic importance of the choke point of the Strait of Malacca was realized way back then. The expedition was sort of for a commercial purpose to get the trading rights and to do away with the injustices faced by the Tamil merchants. This shows that the concept of the trade routes, sea trade routes, the security of sea trade routes for the empire was still very much prevalent. If we see, while we discussed about hard power, the dispersal of soft power in Indo-Pacific through Buddhism is the key example. Ashoka, through his daughter and Sangamitra, sent her as an emissary to Sri Lanka's island of Dvipa Vamsa and Mahavamsa. And from there, Buddhism spread to other regions in Southeast Asia. Even China as a country acknowledges India as a big brother in civilizational matter due to this soft power influence through Buddhism. And then one of the most key event that signifies the Indo-Pacific culture within our country or within the state pre-modern India is the fact that most of the colonial expeditions to create land-based empires were primarily achieved through seas. A lot of colonial struggles between the British, the French, the Dutch, the Portuguese happened in the Indo-Pacific, in the Indian Ocean region, and to establish their hegemony and their control in the subcontinent and the region. Now, if we see, the Dutch gained access to the Malacca in the Indonesian area. British got off India. French again had pockets in India. The Portuguese also had pockets in India. So they knew the importance of this region for India. And one of the most important Indian strategists, K.M. Panikkar, mentions that the colonial powers used India as a base to expand their empire westwards and eastwards the Indian Ocean region. And India should adopt this legacy to formulate a policy of Indian Ocean region ahead. So this British legacy has a big influence in the strategic thinking of IOR. Now, when we come to modern India, after India achieved independence and after India become a modern nation state, we see India connecting with her African and Asian counterparts under the broad banner of decolonization. India was one of the first countries to recognize the People's Republic of China. India called for Asian unity, the organization of Bangtan Conference in 1955, they were all indicators that India had already begun to engage with the countries what now constitute the Indo-Pacific. But when we analyze these policies, we see that these didn't bring in the expected success, as the idea of Asian unity was not forged due to power disparity between India and the other countries forming the Indo-Pacific, because again they felt that India could be a regional hegemon in the region. Secondly, these countries didn't like the preachy attitude what India was giving in terms of non-alignment, in terms of decolonization and all. Non-alignment and the contradiction in non-alignment due to the perceived closeness to the Soviet Union was one of the key factors that did not allow India to be a part of the Asian unity due to the US influence in these countries post the World War II. Now coming to important geopolitical developments that are part of Indo-Pacific. In this age of globalization and localization, what I call, even regional units can cause ripple effects in the whole international system and global politics. Rise of China and the Chinese actions still remain the most important geopolitical development and a concerning development for many countries, not only India. If we see, the open door policy of 1978 was one of the key game changer for China. Given the China's rising economic profile, it could raise its military profile and be an important hegemon rather in the region. If we trace the advances of the People's Liberation Army Navy in the Indian Ocean region, it can be traced back to 1985 when a Luda class destroyer traversed through the region and made port calls at Karachi, Chittagong, Hambantota. And this is really interesting to note that, because right now currently all these ports, like instead of Karachi, the Gwadar port, are now under Chinese authority investments. The permanent presence in the Indian Ocean was established after the 2008 anti-piracy mission and deployment to combat the Somalian pirates as a part of the UN mandated mission. Now post that, fast forward to 2017, China has established a naval base and facility in Djibouti near the critical choke point of Bab el Mandeb. And the most important part is the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, and the checkbook diplomacy is a major concern for China. So through the China-Pakistan economic corridor, through the China-Myanmar economic corridor, China is looking forward to connect all the regions to a nerve center in China. For example, if we see, this is the proposed BRI. This figure shows that even India, this figure assumes that India was to be a signatory of the BRI project. So that's why it shows the Kolkata Pakistan corridor. But now this project has been kept off due to India's persistent opposition to BRI. So if we see, we have the routes from Western Europe connecting Russia to almost 138 countries have been signatories of the BRI. So if we see, we have the Gwadar port. From there, the land routes travel through Pakistan, through Gilgit-Baltistan, and reach Kashgar port in China through the Karakoram Pass. In Myanmar, through the Irrawaddy corridor, we have the routes traversing the whole north-south Myanmar and reaching eastern China. So through BRI, what does China want to achieve? Number one, most importantly, is to bypass the Malacca dilemma. So Malacca dilemma was proposed by Hu Jintao, who, like, according to him, he stated that the powers are trying their best to jeopardize Malacca Strait in order to jeopardize the Chinese economy. China is heavily dependent on these straits, cause a large number of trading ships with energy exports and imports, and most importantly, trading materials pass through these ships. Secondly, to ensure the safety of slops through permanent presence in these regions. And the third and the most important, or rather a domestic reason, is the greater legitimacy for the Communist Party to decrease inner dissent within the state. So if you see the development of Chinese economy and the Chinese society, much of the development has been concentrated in the eastern part of China, and as a result, the West has been neglected. So as a result, there has been a lot of protests, dissent against the communist regime. So as a result, during Deng Xiaoping's regime, he proposed a Go West strategy, from where infrastructure development would be made in the western regions of China, And as a result, for the development in Western regions, they need an access to sea and key port facilities. So as a result, they wish to have these port access in the Indian Ocean, not in the Pacific Ocean. So as a result, the Gwadar port, the Chabahar port, and all are now seen as key outlets for Chinese access in the Western region, Chinese sea access in the Western regions. So in order for these three reasons, China is pursuing BRI mainly and obviously to exert its influence and be a hegemon. The most important development rather is the US-China confrontations and relations in the region. So if we see historically, PRC had established diplomatic relations with the United States in 1972 only. Due to the US presence post World War II in the Pacific, especially near the South Korea and Japan, it was the US presence was a major irritant for the national security objectives as well. So and also China doesn't acknowledge the role of US as a net security provider in the region. So as a result, China went on ahead to take up the role itself so that it doesn't get harmed in any way in the possible future, given that the US-China relations can get deteriorated. Now, like we see a lot of confrontations and narratives being built around a new Cold War in the US-China relations. So that's one of the most important geopolitical development that has happened. So this is the string of pearls theory, like the string of pearls which encompasses the whole Indian subcontinent with the presence of Chinese naval and port facilities. So we see the Kra Isthmus Canal is one of the most important projects, which is sort of trying to bypass the Malacca dilemma. So the ships won't have to now cross through the Malacca; they just have to cross through the canal and directly reach the South China Sea. We have a COCO base surveillance facility. The Chittagong port is in Bangladesh, which has again been taken up by the Chinese. The Gwadar is again another port as a part of the CPEC. Hambantota again like taken on 99-year lease. So we see like through these facilities, China has sort of like encircled India in a strategic sphere. So this is the
Sasikumar, sir. Sorry for bothering intervention. Can you please come to the end, the conclusion? We have only 1 minute for you.
Oh, sorry, sir. So Indian policy in the Indo-Pacific. So we see from NAM, it has moved to look east, and then it has moved to act east, and then to Indo-Pacific. Why east though? Disintegration of the Soviets felt out of the Asian century, then the Chinese inroads into Southeast Asia, and then need to integrate the domestic economy with the ASEAN regional economy. Indian policy in the Indo-Pacific, we see this policy being formulated after Narendra Modi's speech at the Shangri-La Dialogue in 2018. Indian policy is the free and open Indo-Pacific, which would be inclusive of all countries and not even like excluding China. What are the plan of actions are Project Mosam, Mission Sagar, membership of the Indian Ocean Commission, ASEAN centrality and increased engagement with ASEAN, participation and leadership in multilateral institutions like BIMSTEC, IORA. Most importantly is the leveraging of bilateral relations through high-level state visits. If you see, the Prime Minister has visited almost all countries of the Indo-Pacific at least once during his tenure. Now, this is like the Chinese facilities compared with the Indian facilities in the Indian Ocean and Indo-Pacific region. Now, giving considerable attention is given to the Pacific aspect of the Indo-Pacific, then enhanced engagement with extra-regional powers like US, France in terms of LEMUA, AXA, MLSA, then Quad, then naval and military exercises, then establishment of Indo-Pacific division in the MEA, and leveraging use and utility of the Andaman Nicobar Islands in the Indo-Pacific, and most importantly is the increase in arm exports to the region. Now, according to the scholars' point of view, we have two schools which are there. One is the defensive approach, which suggests that India must limit itself to the Indo aspect of Indo-Pacific and contain China there, while the offensive approach suggests that India should go beyond Malacca and engage in the Pacific aspect. And this would give a leverage over India negotiating tables over China. And the challenges are the Chinese forays into Southeast Asia, string of pearls, the BRI, Malaysian relations, their relations with Nepal, lack of adequate capital allocation and budget allocation to Navy, thereby not able to realize full potential, terrorism, especially Pakistan and Afghanistan, and climate change. And the opportunities present for India are to be the alternative manufacturing hub, given India's central location, leveraging the Quad, becoming the net security provider, disaster management. In terms of space, we have the ISRO, which can cooperate with other countries. And most importantly is the great leveraging of the greater bilateral relations in the light of rising anti-Chinese sentiments. And that's a far-fetched idea of greater Indo-Russian cooperation. But given like the distance or the rift between China and Russia, it seems a far-fetched idea for now, but in the future that can be achieved. The conclusion, like what I want to say is or make is that Indo-Pacific is rather seen as a mirror to what China does sometimes. So India must look beyond China rather than responding to China. India must make the first move rather. This will put India ahead of China in the great game of Indo-Pacific and give the required strategic advantage what India needs. So thank you very much. Like I'm really sorry